Okay, I think we can get started today. Hello, everyone. I see many familiar people here and returning participants. Thank you guys for joining us today. The following seminar is going to be brought to you by nonprofit iExplore. iExplore is dedicated to providing an extensive online study and communication platform for students around the world. I'm honored to introduce our seminar presenter today, Cathy Chen, who is a teacher at iExplore and an experienced seminar presenter. Not only that, but she's also a writer for Troy High School's newspaper, The Oracle, and has written multiple stories in the LA Times High School edition. Today, she'll be talking all about journalism. How do journalists write in the newspapers? How can I write like a journalist? And even, how can I write professionally? These are all questions that she will answer in her seminar today. Without further ado, go ahead, Cathy.
All right, thank you so much, Ryan, for the introduction. So like Ryan said, this seminar is going to be on introduction to journalism. So I'm just going to be introducing the basics to journalism and telling you the different pages in a newspaper and the different roles that are present in a newspaper production team. And finally, I'm going to actually go over the different structures of a news article and teach you how to write an article on your own. After listening to the seminar, you should be able to write a decent newspaper article on your own. So hopefully that will be the end result here. All right, so again, hi, my name is Cathy, and I am a rising junior from Troy High School. I am a page editor in the newspaper team, and you will learn later what an editor does in a newspaper production team. All right, so first of all, we have a few quick polls here, and that should be coming right up. It will just be asking you for your age, and why you're here. Right, so I see most of you are from between 10 and 15, and you guys want to learn about news writing techniques and about journalism in general, and that's great because that is basically what the seminar is for. All right. So first of all, do you guys know who any of these people are? If so, just type them in the chat. I will be really impressed if you know these people. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you know their names, just not their pictures maybe. All right, let's see. Oh yes, one of them is Mark Twain. Good job. I'm really surprised that you knew Mark Twain from the photo because I did not know what Mark Twain was. All right, so again, this is Ernest Hemingway, and that is Malcolm Gladwell. And all of them have two similarities, basically. One is that they are they're all really famous writers. So Ernest Hemingway, as you know, wrote so many different novels, and Malcolm Gladwell writes nonfiction books on how to improve your motivation, things like that, and it's on psychology. And Mark Twain wrote a lot of very famous books again. But their second similarity is that they all got their start as journalists. So Hemingway, as you know, wrote for the Kansas City Star. And these two also were journalists before they became very famous writers. So again, you can see that knowing a bit of journalism can do some great benefits for you. All right, so first of all, I'm gonna go over an overview of the pages. So as you know, there are different sections and pages in a newspaper, and I'm not talking about the physical pages. I'm talking about, say, one page would be on, say, news, and the other page would be on opinion. So I will be going over the different sections and what they do and their goals. All right, so first of all, the pages are news, opinion, entertainment, and lifestyle, which we call E&L for short, and then also feature and sports. So we have 5 general pages, but they can vary based on the newspaper. For example, I think LA Times call lifestyle art, or they call entertainment arts instead of entertainment. And some other ones don't have feature, they have something else. So these ones can vary and they can be expanded into larger categories, or they can just have the 5 basic. But these are the ones that we're going to be talking about today. And by covering those 5, you should get a really good idea of what is contained in one newspaper. All right. So what is the goal of the news page? The news page is to communicate information objectively. So emphasis on objectively. We're trying to inform the public without swaying their opinions. Like, for example, if I were to write a news article on the upcoming election. And I want to tell you how the Republican candidate is Donald Trump, and the Democratic candidate is Joe Biden. I wouldn't say that, well, Donald Trump is a better candidate or Joe Biden is a better candidate. What I would say is I would maybe list a few things that they will be doing if they were to become president. So basically, I am trying to give readers the best and most general information that they can get, and I'm trying to inform them to make an educated decision for their own. So even if I feel very strongly on this topic, I cannot let that show. So I'm gonna teach you a few techniques on how to avoid editorializing later in this seminar. All right. Second page I'm going to talk about is the opinion page. And seeing from the title, it's pretty obvious what this page is about. It's to express one's personal opinions. And these opinions are usually political because we have a lot of opinions on political topics. And it's to inform people and show perspective, because in order for you to show your perspective on something, you have to first inform the public so that they have a baseline on what you're going to talk about. And then you can build on top of that to build your perspective or build your argument on what your claim is and what your argument is. And instead of being called opinion, sometimes this page is called editorial or op-ed. That's why if you include opinion in an article, it's called editorializing. And that's something that you should definitely avoid in a news article, but something that is absolutely necessary in an opinion page, because that is basically what's happening. And this right here is a political cartoon, and that normally goes alongside an opinion article, because political cartoons tend to showcase the opinions stated in an article with some visuals, and that is always visually pleasing for an audience. And they can always just show the opinion in a very blatant way that is easy for the audience to understand. And they can sometimes be very funny, and that is appreciated as well. All right. So again, I'm just going to go over the structure of the news page later on, and these 4 pages, I might have seminars on them later on, but I'm just going to go over what they are about for now. All right, the goal of the ENL page, ENL again stands for entertainment and lifestyle, and this is the fun page in my opinion. And this is basically the page that I flip to once I get my newspaper, because for entertainment, it covers new movies, new TV shows, new books, new art galleries. So anything that has to do with entertainment, because it's called entertainment. And it will sometimes give a review of the said movies or TV shows, and sometimes it will be a criticism of the maybe the viewpoints projected in those TV shows, or it could just be a piece praising that book or a art gallery. And lifestyle is slightly different from entertainment, because instead of covering covering things that happen in the entertainment industry, lifestyle page is covering new fashion trends. For example, suddenly everyone is into bucket hats. Then maybe lifestyle page will write an article on why people are so into bucket hats all of a sudden. And yeah, again, it's on new fashion trends and hobbies and foods. And for example, because everyone is in quarantine and we're all into knitting, and people are knitting scarves and sweaters, and that could be written into a lifestyle article. And just any foods, for example, if a new restaurant opened around the corner, some writer might write an article on a lifestyle article on the foods in those restaurants. So I think, in my opinion, these are the fun pages because they cover a lot of interesting topics. And next we have the feature page. So feature page is normally either obituaries or they are detailed descriptions of places, persons, ideas, or organizations. And instead of just stating what that person is about or what the place is about, it humanizes a person, or it just brings the place to life. You know, instead of just telling you this person likes to build computers, this person likes to make robots, they will tell you why this person likes to do this. How did this person get the inspirations? So it's trying to bring the person in question and the audience together by telling them what the person's journey is. And again, this page is personal and it's relaxed. instead of being so structured and so technical like news or opinion, it is just very relaxed and colloquial even. And does anyone know what an obituary is? Type it in the chat section if you do know what that is. This picture right here kind of gives it away. So make a educated guess, if you will, for what an obituary is. It's sometimes shortened for obit.
Laura says when someone dies and then afterwards it's like about their life and their accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is exactly correct. An obituary is, yeah, basically when someone passes away, they will write an article on that person by telling them their life's passions or what that person accomplished throughout his life. So yeah, that is a very good definition of what an obituary is. So that normally falls under the feature page, but sometimes it goes into its own category because it's a little bit morbid and we don't want to include that into the feature page. All right, so finally, our fifth and final page is the sports page. The sports page is pretty self-explanatory. It recounts sports games. But not only that, it also gives news on the sports players themselves. For example, if a swimmer is caught using steroids, then that may go into the sports section, and some writer would write an entire article on how the swimmer is caught using steroids. Or if someone broke the rule, or if a football player is dissociated from an institution like a college, then those would all fall under the sports category because they are related to sports, although they're not recounting a sports game. So that's why they don't necessarily have to be, oh, so-and-so scored in this basketball game, so-and-so won in this basketball game. It can be about the players themselves as well. So sometimes the sports page can kind of have a feature-y vibe. It can be a feature article, but on a sports person, and that will also be a sports page article. All right, so that was all of the pages, and to sum it all up, I order them based on the formality of each page. News is more formal than opinion. Opinion is more formal than sports, and that is more formal than entertainment, which is more formal than lifestyle, and feature is the least formal of them all. For example, one example of this tiers of formality is that for every single one, for all 5 of these, you have to, when you're saying someone's name, after the first time, for example, I said my name, for example, Cathy Chen said blank that day. And the next time I would refer to Cathy, I would refer to her by Chen, her last name. And that's the case for all of these pages. But then for feature, if you are writing about someone, perhaps you would just use their first name, which is something that is very informal. And if you use it in any other pages, it will be considered unprofessional. But if you use it in feature, it would just be considered as a technique to bring the audience and the person in question together. All right, so we have our first question here. I want to write about how more people are starting to bake and cook due to social distancing. In which page does this article belong? So just place your votes real quick. And again, emphasis on bake and cook. All right, I think we can stop it here. Yeah, there we go. So does anyone else want to vote? Oh, okay. So you guys are correct. It falls under the ENL category, which is entertainment and lifestyle. And if you want to be even more precise, it would fall under the lifestyle category. Because this is a new trend, the trend is baking and cooking. And there's nothing really opinionated about it. You can't say that I think, well, you can, but it's not about this article. If the article was about how I think baking and cooking is really bad and people should not be baking and cooking because it, I don't know, harms our economy and people are not buying food from the grocery store, then if I write about that, then that would be an opinion article. But since I'm simply stating the fact that people are baking and cooking more, and I'm just maybe interviewing a few people who are catching on to this trend, then it will certainly be a lifestyle article. All right. So congratulations on those of you who got it correct. And I see that the majority of you got it correct. So good job on that. Our next question, yeah, there we go, ENL. Our next question is, I want to write an article about how Congress should take climate change more seriously. In which page does this article belong? Again, emphasis on how Congress should take climate change more seriously. All right, I think we can end the poll here. Yep, so you guys are absolutely correct. It's opinion because it's what I think. I think Congress should take climate change more seriously, even though that is probably an ubiquitous idea among young people, but it's still an opinion, so that's why it falls under the opinion category. Yeah, so basically, no matter how ubiquitous the opinion is, it's still an opinion, and therefore it should fall under the opinion category. Whoops. All right, next, since we're done with going over each of the pages of a newspaper, now we're gonna tell you about the different roles in a newspaper team. All right, so we have, first of all, we have writers and reporters. I like to think that these are the little worker bees in a production team because they are the ones who are writing the stories actually and interviewing people, because in order to write a story that is accurate and has some sort of quotes in it, you have to carry out an interview. And that's normally the reporter's job. They would go interview people and record what they say. They would transcribe the entire interview onto their computer, and they will start writing the article itself. And I will go over the article structure later, as I said before. All right, so page editors. Page editors, as we said before, right now, I am a page editor, and the news page editor to be precise. So news page article, or just editors in general, we take the article and then we edit it as stated in the title. And if needed, we would make comments and send it back to the writers, and they would be correcting it or editing the article based on our suggestions or comments. And then we would, they would give the article back to us, and then we would write comments and suggestions again, and then send it back to them. So this process may take a few drafting cycles. There may be 4 or 5 drafts that's needed for the article to be furnished and completely smooth and just a good article, a good quality. And after the article is finished, we editors would put it on a page, and we use the software. Normally, software is like InDesign, works really well. And we would just put the entire text on this page in the software, and then we would add any pictures or cartoons, graphics needed. And we would just come up with a really catchy title and write everything else on the paper that is not the article itself. So we would add in the date and the time, the day and the page on the top, and everything like that. All right, next, we have photographers, cartoonists, and graphic designers. Because I never was one of these people, so I don't know exactly what their role is, but I can kind of have a good grasp on what they do. So photographers, as you know, they take pictures and then they submit it to their editors. And graphic designers design graphics like this. They would compile information into a visually pleasing or very straightforward graphic for us to view. And it normally presents really complicated information into a small image that is very easy for readers to interpret. And cartoonists, many of them draw political cartoons, or they can just draw the cartoon strip that you see in some magazines or newspapers. And this one is, as you can see, a political cartoon on Donald Trump bringing back border emergency, government shutdown. So that's interesting. I just thought this is a really cool political cartoon. All right, next we have graphics, cartoons, and photo editors. So these people, I think, are the ones who bring back the graphic designers, cartoonists, and photographers. They turn in their works to their editors, and the editors would give any suggestions, or they would get the best ones. They would distill all the mountains of photographs, and they would get the best one out of it. And that's the one that they would submit to the editors for them to put on the actual newspaper. And last but not least, we have editor-in-chief. So this right here, that's Anna Wintour, and she is very famous for being the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine. I mean, most of you probably know Vogue magazine. That's the fashion magazine that is everywhere. And if you are into fashion at all, you probably know this magazine. And so editors-in-chief, they have the job of collecting everything that the editors send them. And they have the final say in what it gets included in the final paper and what gets omitted. And they can correct the editors on maybe the placement of a photo. So they're basically in charge of the entire process from drafting to the publishing of the articles. So their job is managing and leading the entire team. All right, so we have 2 more questions here. So I am in charge of compiling the finished article. I need to put it on a page and include photos and graphics. Who am I? All right, so put in your votes right now.
While we're waiting, could you clarify for some people like what omitted means?
Omitted is basically what is not included. For example, in a sentence, I went to the park. If I omit a word, it means it gets taken out of it. I go to, and the park is omitted because taken out of. So that's basically what it means. We use it a lot in editing articles because we would just highlight a word and comment next to it, like omit this word or change it up or something like that. All right, so it was a close call, but you guys got it right. It's editor, because what was important is that I am in charge of compiling the finished article. I compile it and I put it on a page. So I am physically doing the work. Well, the editor-in-chief is the one who is controlling the entire situation and seeing that the articles and the pages are looking really good. So editors are the ones who are actually putting the article on the page. All right, so we can stop sharing. All right, so again, it's editor, the answer for that one. We have another one. I am in charge of overseeing the entire process from drafting to publishing. I have the final say in what's included and what's omitted. Who am I? I think this one is pretty obvious because I said it in almost the exact words. I see a lot of you are voting, so thank you.
Also, we have a question. What is the difference of a graphic designer and a cartoonist?
All right, so after this vote, I will go back and show you the difference. All right, I think we can end it right now. Yep, you guys are completely correct. It's editors-in-chief because they are the ones who are in charge of the entire process. All right. Yep, so it's editors-in-chief. And for that, questions about the difference between cartoonist and graphic designer. Here is an example. This thing right here, that's a graphic, because graphics is you're using computer softwares to design something that is, 1, visually appealing, 2, that it showcases all the information in the way that is easy for readers to interpret. So right here you can see that it's COVID-19 communication, and they put different circles next to it to show that there are different types of communication that is happening right now in the COVID-19 situation. And they chose to put the virus background in the back. So they had to make decisions for all of these choices, artistic choices, and they put little logos on the side to make it very, very clear for readers. And they chose different colors for each of the little circles. So their job is, again, basically to make a graphic that is visually appealing, but it also shows all the information that they want in a very straightforward manner. And a lot of times a graphic goes side by side with an article. So the graphic designer can just basically look at the article and see what key information is present in them, and they will just go on their computer and some designing software that I'm not really familiar with, and they would just put in the information and just make it something like that. Or it doesn't really have to be in this format, it can be anything. It can be a chart, it could be a bar graph, just anything like that goes into the graphic designer realm. And then cartoonists, they draw the actual cartoons. For example, this one you can see all the little sketch marks. And cartoonists, sometimes they draw little funny cartoons that go on the side of magazines and newspapers, and I really love those. And those are cartoon strips on the sides. Or you have political cartoons like this one that goes side by side with a opinion article. And so I think that clarifies the questions as to what's the difference between a graphic designer and a cartoonist. All right. Do we have any more questions for now?
Yeah, we have just one kind of general question. What does photographers and cartoonists have to do with COVID-19? So I think it was because you're explaining the graphic had like COVID-19 on it.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't have to be COVID-19 at all. It can be about anything. For example, I wrote an article for my school newspaper on the 2020 census, and because I write for news, it was completely objective, so I can't have a political cartoon. That's why I asked the graphic designer to design a graphic that shows the I think the percentage of people who were included in the previous census and how just different information that was in my article, and I asked them to compile something like that. So it looked like a infographic that you see on all newspapers, and it's just about how many, the percentage of people who were included and their situations, like where they lived, how many kids they had, and things like that. And yeah, so it doesn't have to be on COVID-19 at all. It can be on anything. So graphic designers are just in charge of doing those, making those graphics, and it can be on things like a census, it can be on the number of books people read a year. Everything like that falls into the graphic designer's responsibilities. All right, so I think we covered that. If you're still a little bit confused about that, make sure to just type it into the chat section and I will answer it later. All right, so finally we get to the structure of a news article. All right, so first and foremost, news articles are not your typical English essay. If you have written for a maybe 5th grade essay on a argumentative essay or anything like that, you would see that English teachers require you to have an introduction paragraph, and then you have your thesis at the very end of it, and you have different body paragraphs that have a central idea at the top, the topic sentence, and you have maybe 3 or 4 of those body paragraphs, and you have one final conclusion. And if it were a DBQ or something, you would quote things inside the body paragraphs. So that is your typical English essay structure, right? But news articles are nothing like that. News articles follow a almost completely different structure. And instead of calling the different paragraphs, we call them blocks. I mean, people might call them differently, but from now on, I'm going to refer to them as blocks, not paragraphs. All right, so this is, I know this is a bit blurry, but you don't have to read the content inside it. I just wanted to give you a visual of the inverted triangle. So the inverted triangle is something that is very, very important in news writing, because that is what we follow when we are just gathering our information. We start with the most newsworthy info. That means all the actual facts, like the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So the 5 W's and sometimes the how. And that is for our first block. And for our following blocks, we would go into the details that elaborate on the first block. We would go into how they started this thing, or how they plan to continue it, how they were inspired to do this thing. And eventually we would go into the very specifics, and those would probably be in quotes, be delivered through quotes. And we would just include them at the very end. So there is no conclusion, there is no thesis, there is no topic sentence. So I think personally, I feel like news articles are a lot easier to write than English articles, because you're following a structure that is just set for you, that you don't really have any room for creativity. And that might be frustrating for some people, but that is very easy that makes it really easy to write. And this only applies to news and opinion, maybe, by the way, because if you want more creative freedom and creativity in your writing and freedom in structuring your article different ways, then you might consider the pages like feature or lifestyle, because you have a lot more flexibility in those pages. But news is fairly structured. We follow a similar format for every single article. So that's why if you open up a newspaper, particularly if you open up a school newspaper, you would notice that a lot of the articles look the same in structure. Like, we would just follow the same format every single time. So that may get a bit boring, but it delivers the information just in a very concise and straightforward way. All right, so these are the 4 main parts of a news article. We have the lead, which is the first block of a news article. Then we have info blocks, which is everything else that is not a bridge or a quote. And a bridge is something that I will talk more about later. So it's basically connecting between info block and a quote. And quotes are, again, very self-explanatory. It's a quote from maybe an interview that we did. All right, so again, we have this inverted triangle here because that is one of the most important things in news writing. We follow the structure. We start from the general and then we narrow it down to specific. If you think of it like a scientific way, it would be the deductive method, if I am correct. I think so. So you start from the general and then you go down to the specifics. All right, so now I'm gonna give you an idea of how each block is structured or how each block can be written. First of all, we have the lead. The lead goes over the 5 W's. The 5 W's are who, what, why, when, and where. I think I didn't repeat any, hopefully. And it basically covers the information in one sentence. It doesn't have to be a long sentence. It's normally pretty short. And just in that one sentence, it covers all the information. So basically, if you want to get to know what an event is about, you can just go to any news article and read the first sentence. And that should give you a really good idea of what is going to be talked about in the rest of the article, because that is the all-encompassing idea that is going to be presented. It sums up the rest of the article, basically. And it has, the basic structure is participle phrase, which is, for example, putting on my coat, I went out into the rain. So putting on my coat would be the participle phrase. And then we have the statement, the location, plus the date. And I'm going to give an example of this so that you guys can have a better idea of what I mean. And the why is presented in the participle phrase. The who and what are presented in the statement. The location is the where, and the date is the when. Yeah, sorry, excuse me. All right, so our example, hang on. Yeah, so our example here is cultivating plants using modern gardening techniques. Botany Club initiated their hydroponic garden project in Troy High School, January 8th. All right, so the angle is basically the focus. And the focus, another name for it is the why. So if you guys can just type in the why for me right here in the chat section, if you guys know what it is. And again, if I go back, the why is presented in the participle phrase. And participle phrases are things like putting on my coat, I did blah, blah, blah. So does anyone know what the focus is for this one? If you break down the structure of the lead.
We're not having any responses yet in the chat.
All right, so again, so since the first part is a participle phrase, and that is the why of the article. So
someone just answered. They said cultivating plants using modern gardening techniques.
That is exactly correct. Thank you so much for your answer. So this entire thing is the angle. So I'm not going to type the entire thing. I'm just going to type cultivating plants, blah, 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 techniques. Not a fast typer, if you can tell. All right. So what is a who in this lead? I think I chose a fairly simple lead to show what the who is.
And people are saying Botany Club.
Yep, that is correct. So the who right here is Botany Club. Because it's the why followed by the who normally, and then what is a what in this lead? Can anyone tell me what what is? I'll give you a few seconds because this might be a little long to type. Again, it's...
So someone said garden, someone said hydroponic garden project.
Basically, you guys, if you combine those answers, you basically have the entire right answer. So it's a lot simpler if you think of it like this. It's the thing that is followed right by the who. So who and then what is followed right after it, which is initiated their hydroponic garden project. So this entire thing is the what. All right, so when. This is a bit flip-flopped, but I think you guys would be able to tell what the when is in this lead.
A lot of people are saying January 8th.
Yep, correct. You guys are very quick in following up what this is about. And finally, what is a where? Where did this take place?
They're saying Troy, like as in Troy High School.
Yeah, correct. So not Roy, Troy High School. There we go. So the angle is cultivating plants using modern gardening techniques. And we go into the who, which is Botany Club. And the what is initiated their hydroponic garden project. And where? In Troy High School. And when? January 8th. And this, by the way, is the structure that we use for writing out dates. We have the abbreviation for the month, and then we just put the actual date. And we don't, as you notice, we didn't put on January 8th. We didn't put this one. We deleted the on because We just tagged it on at the very end. So it's not technically grammatically correct, but that is what we follow as news article writers. All right, so good job, guys. You guys filled this out in a really short time. I was really impressed. So thank you guys for being so active in the chat section. And finally, we are going into info blocks. So info blocks make up what from maybe 50% to 75% of the article. It's normally 1 to 3 sentences long, and the sentences are not very long. They're just normal statements, because you don't want a very long sentence that confuses a reader. Because again, you're not testing the reader's comprehension skills. You're just simply informing them of what's happening. But also, you don't want to fall on the left hand of the spectrum and just use really simple language. You want to find a good middle ground and have advanced language, but you're not testing the reader's comprehension skills. And you don't want the sentences to be very choppy. And what I mean by this is you having too many commas in it. For example, you have too many interrupting phrases in it. Like, I, in fact, did go to this place with blah, blah, blah. So you see the in fact is a interrupting phrase in it. And it doesn't have to be this. It can be any interrupting phrase. And that makes the sentence very choppy. And that just makes it slightly more difficult for the readers to comprehend. So you want to deliver the information as straightforward as possible. And again, this is very, very important. You have to keep it very objective. And I know that people can't really be objective. It's impossible. You could argue that there is no news article that is completely objective. But you're just trying to do it as best as possible. You're trying to include the information in a way that is not, you're not picking and choosing what you include. But technically, if you go on, say, CNN versus Fox News, you would see that, going back to the presidential election example, you would see that they paint the two people in very different ways. So you can see that even for news articles, professional news articles, people are not objective, right? So I think people can agree with that CNN and Fox News portray people in vastly different lights. Right, so next we have a bridge. So this bridge right here helps you kind of visualize what a bridge is supposed to do. It bridges the article from one end, that is the objective end, into one that has maybe a bit more opinion, a bit more sass, because a bridge, it attributes opinions to sources. And I'm going to give an example of this as well, because it might be a little hard to understand what I'm saying just based on theory. And it really incorporates viewpoints of different people, because you're not supposed to just have one if it's a really opinionated version. If it's a really opinionated quote, you're not supposed to just have that one quote. You are supposed to have viewpoints from different people so that you have a balanced article that is not biased. Because if you just have one viewpoint that is very on the left side with the right side, you may come out with an article that is very left or very right. All right. So in the bridge, you have to continue to avoid editorializing. And editorializing, again, is the act of putting your own opinion into the article. And how you avoid that is by attributing every single opinionated sentence to a person speaking, to a person who has made that statement in a release of some kind of open letter or something. And another thing is that you always say last name said. For example, for my name, I would be Chen said, because I see people doing said Chen, because that is a very fictional way of writing. You see that in many narrative stories. Like if you open up a fiction book, and you might see a lot of said blank, said Henry, said this, said that. But in news writing, you have to make sure that you're doing blank said, Chen said, Henderson said. So that is a lot more professional in the ways of writing. Right, so here is an example of a bridge. According to Co-President John Pace, mock trial provides a realistic simulation of the courtroom experience. The students enhance their ability to communicate clearly in a public forum through participation in the trial, Pace said. Again, you can see that's Pace said, not set Pace. And you can see how in this bridge we avoided editorialization by attributing every single sentence that have an ounce of opinion in it. Even it has like a few words that is opinionated or connotative words in the sentence, you have to attribute it to someone. It's not as extreme in some professional news articles, but for now we have to make sure that we are staying objective, because we don't have the experience yet to be able to express our opinions while being objective. Right. So you can kind of see the structure here. You start with according to whom, and for the first time that you say their names, it's kind of the same with English essays, because with English essays, you say their full name for the first time that you mention the person. And for every single time that you mention them after the first time, you would just state their last name, because if you just say their entire name over and over again, that would be very tiring and for you and for the readers. All right, so again, according to co-president John Pace, we include their position, and their last name is Pace, so I included Pace in the end. And this sentence is opinionated because it provides a realistic simulation. And people might disagree that it doesn't provide a realistic simulation. People might say that mock trial is not realistic because real courtrooms don't work like that. And so whenever someone may disagree with their statement, you have to make sure to attribute it to someone. And in this case, I attributed this statement to co-president of Mock Trial Club, who is John Pace. And this next sentence is also opinionated because he said the students enhance their abilities to do this and that. And people might disagree. People might say that by participating in mock trial, the students are being harmed. They are being influenced in a negative way. They are being too opinionated, say. So people might disagree with that statement. That's why I included an attribution in the end. And again, so a bridge is bridging your article from the objective side into the opinionated side. And the opinionated side is the quote, which is what we're going to talk about here. So for quotes, you write the full quote. For some professional articles, you might just include a snippet of the quote inside a info block, but what we do right now is we include the full quote. For example, there are two ways to incorporate quotes into your article. First is that you split the quotes into two sections. For example, for this one, I split the quote into I love dogs, and they are super cute and fluffy. And by splitting it, I included Potter said in the middle. And as you can see, Potter is a last name. So I love dogs, comma, Potter said, they are super cute and fluffy. But if your quote is just one sentence or it's just really short, or you just simply want to keep your quote together, then you would just do it like this. I hate dogs because I'm allergic to them, comma, Granger said. So as you can see, I am doing the quote two ways, but both of them are viable options for you to use. And here are longer examples of what you can do for quotes. I'm not going to read the whole thing because that might be a bit boring. But again, so the first one is the general statement. And then he goes into more details of what this statement means. So when you're splitting quotes, you want to make sure that the first part is the general idea of what the person is going to say. And the second part is an elaboration of that, why they think so. And the same thing with this one, I love dogs. That's a general statement that Potter said. And the next part is the reasoning or the idea behind that. And so the same thing for this one, competition specifically improve our speaking skills. And that is the general opinion of his. And then he goes into why he thinks that, because they're speaking in front of an entire court, because we're high school students and things like that. And another way you can do it is by keeping the quote together. Yeah, you can see this one because it needs to be kept together. There is no way that you can say the scores can drastically change from one person's performance, Kim said, which is why mock trial is a very team-oriented sport. That can make it just very choppy again because you're interrupting a phrase in the middle of it where it doesn't really belong. It's better to be kept together. And that's why I tagged the attribution at the very end by saying, quote, and then comma, Kim said. Right, so finally, after giving an overview of all the other blocks, here is a very basic outline of what is supposed to be in a basic article, basic news article. You start with the lead, which is, again, the participle phrase, statement, who, what, when, and why. And you go into info block, info block, info block. And this is where you go into elaborating what has been stated in the lead. You say, why did the person, or not why, maybe how did the person come up with the plan? When did the person come up with the plan? Or who participated in this initiative or something like that. And then you go into the bridge by saying this person's opinion, comma, blank said. And then you go into the quote, which is a full quote. You don't really have to do a lot of work there. You just put it in quotation marks and then put the person's attributions. And then you might have one more info block after the quote and bridge. And then you finish off with a quote. So the easiest way to finish off an article is by including a quote at the very end. Instead of doing a conclusion like you do in an English article, you simply put someone's quote in the end. And that quote at the very end is normally a quote that is projecting into the future. It probably goes something like, in the future, our club hopes to expand into broader horizons. So things like that are really good material for final quotes because they give an idea of what we should look out for in the future. All right. And again, for bridges and quotes, each pair should express about the same idea. Just make sure that you're not being repetitive and not using the same word choice, but they are supposed to express the same idea or the same topic, basically. And the structure of this news article is, again, general to specific. I cannot overemphasize that enough. It's not a typical English essay. And news articles are written in third person and usually past tense, and we have many short paragraphs or blocks. So past tense is kind of determined upon whether you're writing an article in the past for a event that happened in the past. If it's going to happen in the future, again, the presidential election thing, if you're writing about that, then maybe you're using the future tense, or maybe you can use the present tense, normally the present tense. So just things like that. It's not necessarily past tense. It can be future tense. All right, so I think that was the final slide that I have. So any questions?
I'm looking at the chat right now and I don't see any questions.
All right, so just if you have any questions, so pop them down in the chat section below. Sorry. All right, so because we have learned so much about the sections and the different blocks, I'm gonna actually dissect this article for you guys. And this article is something that I wrote for when I was a writer in my newspaper club. And it's about how film students took a trip to Disney Animation Studios. So this was a super fun piece to write because it's on a really interesting subject, that is Disney, which is something that I completely am in love with. And let's see if this can stop showing. All right, so first of all, the first block is always can anyone tell me what the first block is? Most of the times, or always? The first
They're
block?
saying the lead?
Yeah, or the lead.
Lead.
It's spelled really weirdly, so it can be either spelled like lead, like L-E-D-E, or it can be spelled like L-E-A-D. So there are both two ways to spell it. We normally spell it like L-E-D-E because it's more unique, and we don't get it confused with the other lead. So again, it's the lead. And you can see here as well that it goes from first a participle phrase, exploring, blah, blah, blah. And then the who is IB film class, and what is visited Walt Disney Animation Studios, where, in Burbank, when, January 15th. And a rule with abbreviations is that if you're going to use this name, Walt Disney Animation Studios, more than once in an article, then the first time you would put the abbreviation in parentheses after it. And by doing so, you allowed yourself to use that in future mentions. You don't have to keep saying Walt Disney Animation Studios because that is a very long name and it kind of just makes your article a lot longer. And yeah, so as you can see, this one is an info block during a tour of the studio. It's completely objective, or I hope it is, engage in discussion with employees from each brand of WADAS, or Walt Disney Animation Studios, because this is a fact. They engage in discussions. There is no argument. You can't say that, oh, they didn't talk, because they did talk to the employees, and including the sound engineering and animation departments. That is adding on to what I just said. And participants also explore the set of the TV shows. Yeah, so that is a fact again. And another thing to watch out for is that when I say don't editorialize, also don't make your article very boring, because instead of saying they explored it, I can say that participants also went to. And that just doesn't sound as fun or exciting, right? And to be sure, that was a very exciting process for them to go through. So I can say they explored without being opinionated, without editorializing the article, because by saying that they explored it, I'm not putting my own opinion in it. They did explore the sets. But that just makes the article a lot more lively and not grounded or really bland. Because you never want your articles to come out really bland, even though before joining the newspaper team, I always thought that reading the newspaper was the most boring thing in the entire world, especially news articles, because it just states everything in order. But if you really think about it, we really try our hardest to make sure that it's not boring, even though sometimes it may still come out as not the most exciting thing to read. But again, they explored, so that just makes the word choice a lot more lively and just not so boring, you know? So this entire thing from here to here, this is all info block. Info block. So yeah, so 3 info blocks we have here, and they are basically in the same format. We have a transition here because we don't want it to jump suddenly. So we have a transition during the tour of the studio, transition into this following block, and then for each one I included a transition guided by Disney animator Shannon Reed, and that is another transition. So for each block I made sure to include a transition so that we are not jumping from block to block abruptly. And can anyone tell me what this is? According to film teacher Jim Folletta, the tour expanded the students' knowledge about the wide range of jobs offered in film studios. Folletta said, think of connecting from info block to quote. So can anyone tell me what this is?
They're saying a bridge plus quote.
All right, so this is just a bridge because it's connecting it from the info block, which is the thing right here, to the bridge in the following block. So by doing so, you are bridging the 2 parts of your article. So this is a bridge. And as you can see, it follows almost entirely the structure that I said in these slides. So if you can see, it starts with according to, and then position of the person, which is a film teacher, and the person's name, Jim Folletta. And I have a sentence that he said, but I changed it into different words. And then I had another sentence that he said, but I reworded it. And Folletta said. As you can see, it's not said Folletta, it's Folletta said, because that's the more professional way of doing it. All right, so this is, if people can just type it in there real quick, what is this? Should be
People
easy.
are saying that it's a quote.
Correct. So this part is a quote. It's, as you can see, I split this quote into 2 parts because I felt like it's long enough. One is long enough to be split into 2 parts. 2, I felt like if I just kept it together, it would have been kind of long for people to read. And yeah, so this quote just talks about how they were able to look into the film industry and get a really close look at it without just learning stuff in class that is not applicable in real life. All right, so this is a bit more special. It's a special form of a block, but if you just look closely at this part, you would be able to distinguish what this is. So if you just look at it as 2 blocks, this is 1 block and this is 1 block. So can anyone tell me what this one is? The one that is highlighted right now. It is similar to the structure of this one, if you can tell. Folletta said, or sentence, Folletta said, and sentence, Folletta said. So can anyone tell me what this thing right here is?
People are saying it's a quote.
It's actually a bridge because it's similar to what's happening right here. Statement, participants obtained a better, more accurate gauge of careers beyond the fundamental ones introduced in class. Folletta said, comma, Folletta said. And this is similar to what I have right here. So through the direct interactions with the production process, students applied the skills learned during the school year in a realistic setting, comma, Folletta said. So this is, again, a bridge. Even though it's not bridging from info block to quote, it's still bridging from the previous block to the next quote. And so this part is definitely a bridge. And the top part, as you can see, is just 1 sentence that is not really attributed to anyone. And it's actually a very just simple statement that is not opinionated, it's not editorializing. So you could argue that that part of the sentence is a info block. But since it's not a block, we refer to this whole thing as the bridge. So this whole thing will be called the bridge, even though the first sentence is technically not a part of the bridge, if that makes sense. And then this again is a quote, because once you see quotation marks, it's a quote. And I think the easiest way to distinguish between the quote and the bridge is that the bridge, the sentence in the bridge does not have quotation marks. It is something that they said, but I reworded it. For example, if someone said that, I think going to this museum opened my eyes about what happened in ancient times, I would say in the bridge, I would reword a sentence and say that going to this museum would be an eye-opening experience for people interested in learning about history, blank, Folletta said, comma, or not Folletta, or person's last name said. So it would not have quotation marks because that is not the exact words of the person, because when you're quoting someone, you have to make sure that it's almost exactly or exactly the words of the person, because you don't want to misquote someone, because that is not a good thing to do, because that is not someone said, and you can't just put words in other people's mouth. And so yeah, it's the easiest way to distinguish is quotes have quotation marks and bridges do not have quotation marks. And so that's why this part right here, it's a quote. That's pretty easy. And let's see if you guys can get this one right. What is this one? Hint. Senior Thomas Everett said, without quotation marks. So can anyone tell me what this is? Similar.
They're saying it's a bridge.
Yep, correct. Yay. Good job, guys. It is a bridge because one, it doesn't have quotation marks. Two, it has Senior Thomas Everett said. So this thing is, I interviewed this guy, and then I just transcribed his entire interview. And I thought this thing that he said was pretty well said, and I really like what he said. So I just reworded his sentence because I didn't exactly like the way that he said it. So I reworded it and made it into a bridge. I said, this person said this, even though that's not his exact words, it's his idea. So that's not my idea because I can't editorialize. I cannot put my opinion into my article. But I can say that this person thinks blah, 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 you know?
We actually have a couple questions that I would like to go over before time runs out here.
Definitely.
So someone was asking, like, for the bridges, like, why is it always so-and-so, like, said? So, like, why is it specifically using the word said?
Okay. So I know that if you are if you're a really good English writer, you would know that we should not use the same word, or we should not use said more than once in a article, or not an article, in an essay that we write. For example, in my English class last year, my English teacher would tell me that, oh, you should never use the word said because it is so bland and so objective, not connotative. You should always say something like, he exclaimed, she screamed, he whispered, she murmured, things like that. But we cannot use those in news articles because those would be implying that we assume that they said those in those tones. So instead of said, we can say things like they stated, or they just non-connotative things like that. It cannot be things like they whispered, because you are just claiming that they whispered this. Because you can't add your own input into your article. You can only be stating the facts and including what other people said. You cannot add your own input because you have to remain objective. So that's why it cannot be anything other than said or stated. And since said is the easiest one, we normally just stick with said, even though it might be a bit boring and repetitive. Said, but it's easy and we're not adding our opinions.
That's a great answer. We also have another question is, like, are there really specific things that make a newspaper unpopular if you write it down before you publish it?
If you write it down before you publish it. So the things that we include in the article that make it...
I think they're trying to get at, like, what should you not include if you want to make yours popular? Okay. Like, what are things that will make it, like, hard for people to read, or they just don't like it?
Okay, so one thing that would make it really unpopular is if, again, you are really biased. So the main thing that drives people away is if your news articles are biased toward one side. If your articles are really left, you might drive people away because they don't think that they're getting the whole picture. Because by being so biased, you're not presenting every single fact. And you're just presenting facts that you think will help your opinion and it would support your claims. But as a news writer, what you're supposed to do is present the entire picture. You're supposed to give people the full picture of what's happening. And that is very important in a newspaper. Where you put your opinions is in the opinion page. And no matter how opinionated those are, you should be fine, unless people are just offended by those opinions. That might drive them away as well. But the one thing that really drives people away is if your news articles are very biased. For example, I think people have this complaint about Fox News that it's very biased because they don't explain everything and they include only things that pleases their point of view and their opinions. So that's why people have a problem with it, because it's so biased. So I think that is the main thing that drives people away.
Nice. That's very cool. Oh, also another question was, why are there so many bridges in like an article?
Okay, so the reason that we have so many bridges in an article is because, again, we're not professional writers. Professional writers would have a more different diverse ways of connecting quotes into their article. But the most basic and the most foolproof way of connecting bridges into your article is by using quotes. And by using quotes, you are not only getting to make a better transition from info block to quotes, because it will be really stark to just suddenly transfer from the student's most recent assignment involves experimentation with sound effect recreation, and then a quote, the representatives talked about the set of Blackish. That would be really just not a really smooth transition. It will be super abrupt for people to read, like, oh, where did this come from? So a bridge really just smoothes out that transition between the two parts. And the reason why we have so many of them, because using bridges, we also get to include more opinion, more emotions into our articles. Because without the bridges, we only have info blocks and quotes. And quotes can only do so much to include emotions in your article. And info blocks are, if done just the regular way, it can become kind of dry because you're not including anything emotional or opinionated into your article. You're just stating facts. And facts are not that exciting, if you know what I mean. And so that's why we include a lot of bridges, because they help us include more emotions and opinions into our article. Do we have any other questions?
I think that's all the questions for now. So
All
I
right.
want to thank everyone for coming to the seminar. I really hope you guys learned a lot. I learned so much about like journalism, and I'm really excited because now whenever I read like a news article, I'll really know like how they wrote it. And I think that's like really one of the most interesting things. But again, thank you, Cathy. And if you guys want to see more of these seminars, definitely you can go to our YouTube channel, I Explore Club, and you can go and search up. We have like more seminars recorded. Also, be on the lookout for new seminars that are going to be coming up in the following weeks. So once again, thank you guys all for coming, and I hope you guys enjoyed the seminar.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for just coming to the seminar and listening to me talk. All right.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye guys.